going to talk about framing around obstacles that we're going to run into in the basement. I'll show you some of the things that I encountered and some ideas that I had. Things like dealing with this overhead plumbing over here, or dealing with staircases, stair stringers, and various other things that are already existing that we've got to work around, which makes it a lot more difficult than new construction. One thing to keep in mind when you're framing your walls is access to utilities and also to any plumbing cleanouts that you may have. For example, in this wall we've got our sewage line that's running down along the wall. It's all foamed in and it's nice and sealed up, but if I ever need to get to this, if I have a plumbing issue or so, we're going to want to be able to get through our finished walls and have easy access to that. What I found here and I'm going to use are these drywall access panels. I got these at a local hardware store. You can find these readily available at most of your hardware stores. Framed it in. There's a little bit of a flashing around here on this panel. This panel is going to go right up into this area on top of the drywall. You can paint this, wallpaper it, whatever to match your wall. And then this panel will pop out easily if I ever need to gain access to this inside. So it's important when you're framing your walls and you're planning utilities and maintenance access, keep these kinds of things in mind. Here's another area where we want to make sure we keep access for the future, another sewage cleanout line. This is a smaller version of the drywall access panels. This is framed in just to be able to fit inside this flashing. After the drywall is up, this will be open. This panel will be secured on top of the drywall, painted to match the walls. And if you ever need access to this with a simple screwdriver, you can just pop this out. And once you take this out of the wall, you've got clear access to your utilities. Speaking of utilities, you can see up in the upper right-hand corner there, we've also got a shutoff valve for the outside water supply. So we're going to have to keep that in mind when we're building access for our framing and our drywall. We also have to consider here HVAC and also our duct shutoff dampers. My plan is to build ladders in front of this and drywall down in front of the ducting. When we do that, it's going to block in these kinds of HVAC shutoffs. So similar to what I mentioned about the sewage access panels, like these, I'm going to plan on building in similar access in the ceiling where necessary, so that I can get at least one or more of those where I'm drywalling in. Over here where the electrical box is and our incoming internet service and those kinds of utilities are, we're going to put a closet door here that's going to be flush up against the wall. It's going to hide this, and when it's all done, it'll just look like it's a closet, but that'll give us easy access to our utility area. Framed in here for a window. This is just roughed in right now. We're going to trim this out later on, and I'm going to put in a set of double wide doors here and give us access to the utility room. One door on this side for the utility tubs and one door on this side for the sump pump. As I got over to this wall, one of the issues I had to deal with was this sewage pipe that's hanging from the beams up across the top, and I was trying to come up with a couple different ways that I wanted to solve this without losing space along the floor from the walls by building the wall completely outside of those pipes. So what I've done is I've framed up a wall that's going to run underneath the pipe with enough clearance, and as you can see on the floor, I'm building a ladder right now. That ladder is going to be suspended from the floor joists up above and run down just in front of this wall here, and I'll transition a nice 45 angle, so when it's finished off, we'll get as much space as we can this way, especially in front of the staircase, and then it's going to come up a short little 45 and then finish up at the top of the wall. So this is what our finished job looks like when we're framing in around the waste pipe that's overhead. Again, we tried to keep as much space as we could with this wall, so we built this in as close to the wall as we can. And out here we bumped out this ladder to come out around that waste pipe. We tied in some 45-degree cuts here, so at the end we're going to have a nice 45-degree transition from the lower wall and then a 45-degree transition to this upper ladder section. Here's an area that was a pretty big pain. We have the waste piping that's coming down from a lavatory up over here in this area, in this corner of the home on the next floor. So you got waste piping tying in from that. We also have a sink So we have a toilet, sink, and so on, all running down into there. We also have a pipe cleanout that we're going to need access to eventually. So we have a cleanout port right there. We also have plumbing running upstairs with some shutoff valves. And finally, we've got a shutoff valve for an exterior water spigot. So in this one corner of the house, we've got a hell of a lot going on that we had to work around. What we're going to do here, again, trying to save as much floor space and overhead space as we can. We used our ladder coming along this waste pipe, and once we got here where it's bumping out and turning away, and if I go down on this angle, you can kind of get a little bit better view of how that's turning away from the wall. So it's bumping out into our space. So what we did is we framed this here, and we kept this 45 at the same location as the rest of that 45 transition down the wall, except we just decided to carry it from here all the way up the rest of the way, and then frame out a little area here where our ceiling will transition in. So we've got now a 45 that's going to continue from that wall straight down through here all the way to this side of the wall. It's going to come up and then bump out just a little bit and finally transition up. And then that's going to give us an area where we can tie in our ceiling right here to this corner and come out. So if I take you to this side, you can see exactly how that 45 is going to transition from the short area here all the way down and transition up and give it a fairly clean look. Now, it was a pain in the butt to frame this because you're working around a lot of things, and also, as I mentioned, we want to keep access where we can to plumbing cleanouts, to our shutoff valves over there and over here. So this looks a little awkward, but I framed in a couple of those drywall access panels here that's going to give me access to this area in case I ever need it here. And then up through the ceiling, I can access over here to get to that shutoff valve. Here's another area where we wanted to try to save as much space as we possibly could from our wall and in this room. We had this exhaust duct from our furnace running up through the joist space here and then up through and ultimately out the ceiling of the home. To try to save as much space as we could, instead of bumping out a big square here or even all the way down, we were able to kind of measure around this, cut an appropriate angle, and tie it in between these two walls here. And now, as you can see, we're going to lose very little space there. This is a case where I have a wall where the top plate is going to run in between a joist span. So there's really no place to secure the top plate in between the joists that are up above. So what I did here, in this case, I ran some spacers in between the joists. And in this part, I ran a stud up right through and nailed it there. And in each of these places here, you can see I ran a spacer in between the joists and then was able to nail my top plate to that point. Same thing on this side. Where I had a little bit of an additional difficulty, if you notice here, I've got my duct trunks running for my HVAC system, exhaust for the furnace, and those things running in between. So I had a span from this area here all the way until that wall beyond the steel beam that would be completely unsupported at the top. And actually, if you were to push on this wall, there would be a little potential give. Now, it is tied into this wall here, running across. But by the same token, there's nowhere to secure this wall up at top underneath this duct. So this wall is also mostly free floating. The way that I dealt with that, and if you can see up here, might be a little difficult, but I ran a small piece of 2x3 across the two joists to secure that in, and then I cut this piece here with a 45 angle tying top here to that piece. And this angular piece, when you have something coming in on an angle, that provides a significant amount of stiffness. Screwed it into the piece running across the two joists and screwed it in down here. And that gave this entire wall a tremendous amount of stiffness in that direction and allowed me to secure it up there so that it won't be moving.